We're actually going to get this work meeting started a little bit early because we have a significant amount of ground to cover. So I'm going to call this to order at 5:58 p.m. Members present this evening are myself, Mayor Morrow, Council Members Dillon, Gearbaugh, McClellan, Rhodes, Tahar, and Seo, as well as Councilwoman-elect Mitchell. From City staff, we have City Manager Campbell, Clerk Royal, Treasurer Bennett, City Superintendent Rubel, DPW Director Fordyce, and Administrative Assistant Getzman. Did I pronounce that right? Getzman? Okay. Thank you for being here. At this time, the rest of you who are in the audience, if you'd be so kind to sign in the back to my left, we would appreciate that. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended. I spoke to Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes before the meeting this evening, and I believe we have a few folks in the audience who may be unable to stay for the duration of the work meeting. Therefore, I would like to provide a public comment period at both the beginning and end. So if someone would indulge me and move to approve the agenda as amended, I would appreciate that.
So moved.
Moved by Dillon, seconded by McClellan to approve the agenda as amended. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. We proceed now to the first public comment period under the Open Meetings Act. Any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. I would encourage you to come forward to the podium if you'd like to speak. And again, we've got a lot of ground to cover this evening, so if you could be brief, we would appreciate that. Are there any citizen comments? Are there any citizen comments? No? Okay. Well, that's surprising, but we gave the opportunity, and that's what's important. We move on to the one discussion item of the evening, which is Building Department Review. I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Campbell in just a minute, but in addition to the material that you received in your packet, I believe there was one supplemental provided this evening that relates to a request that Councilmember Gearbaugh put in the form of an email, I believe, on Friday. Is that correct? Okay, so you should have that in front of you. Let me just say this, and I actually want to begin by saying both the work meeting and the regular meeting, we have, or staff has, resolved any outstanding technology issues, and we are live streaming tonight, again, for both meetings. So I wanted to make you aware of that. Second, and more importantly, it has been a tradition of the City of Saline for some time to continue to evaluate, scrutinize every service, every expenditure on our budget, every division of city government, to make sure and to identify opportunities for improved efficiencies, cost saving, and reform. I believe very strongly that in municipal government there are no sacred institutions, that nothing is above being reviewed and being evaluated. So in keeping with that standard, with that principle, we're here tonight to consider some proposals to reform the Building and Engineering Department. And I would note that we have done something like this in the past, actually on numerous occasions. Some have resulted in something tangible, others have not, like police dispatch and like the consolidation of Saline Parks and Rec and Community Ed. But that doesn't mean it wasn't an important exercise and it wasn't valuable. So again, in keeping with that tradition, we're here tonight. We have a variety of different proposals that we're going to hear from, or entities we're going to hear from, excuse me. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Campbell in just a moment. I believe that each of the petitioners is going to have approximately 10 minutes, 10 or 15 to present their proposals. Then we'll go around the table and address any questions or concerns. I'm not looking to identify or develop consensus this evening. This is a big issue. I want people to be thoughtful, and there may be some outstanding questions and concerns that come out of our discussion tonight that need to be addressed in the future. So my plan right now is to add this as a discussion item to our agenda for our second meeting in January, which, because of the holiday, is actually the second week, the second Monday in January. Is that correct, Clerk Royal? So, okay. The 9th, excuse me. So again, I'm going to be looking to develop some form of consensus at that time, unless something that I am not anticipating comes up between now and then. So unless there are questions for me, I will turn it over to our city manager. Again, please remember this is directed at both our both council members and our guests. Please be sure to ask your questions and make any statements into the microphone, because we are recording this and we'd like the people who are watching us live to get the most out of it. So with that, Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, as Mayor Morrow mentioned, opportunity is arisen to evaluate and look at building department services, which we're doing. So, staff has contacted and met with 4 entities, groups that could potentially offer a level of service, and they all, as I'm sure you've, when you've reviewed the material, they're slightly different, but very valuable information nonetheless. So what I'd like to do is, so we have Washington County Building, we have Carlisle Wortman, York Township, and then we also have in your package, you have information from Pittsfield Township, but I don't believe they're here to present. However, then of course, the fifth alternative is status quo, what we currently provide. So, unless there's questions of me, I would go ahead and start and bring the folks up to talk to us. All right. So, Deb and Don, if you want to come up here in those 2 seats, and Kristen, if you could give them the mic right there. So, if you all just kind of want to, again, just having a discussion here. You know, kind of like around the dining room table, I guess, but to tell them what you all could do for the city and its residents as far as building services.
Okay. Can you hear me? So I gave each of you a packet, and I think maybe that you've seen some of it probably already because I'd given most of it to Todd previously. So I won't go into a lot of detail about that, but I do want to, at least address the things that we can provide for the city. My name's Deb Schmidt. I'm the Administrative Supervisor for the Washtenaw County's Building Inspection Department. I'd like to introduce Don Schnettler. He is one of 2 building officials that we have on staff. He's also dual licensed. He's a building and electrical inspector, and he currently does your electrical inspections here at the city. So with that said, some of the biggest things that I think I want to point out are that, we're very accessible. The inspectors are in every morning from 8 to 9 to talk to customers. We have online permitting. We have, they can access their properties to see what the status of their permits are. They can call inspections in 24/7. If you should choose to go with the county, all liability comes to the county, and it's at no cost to you. So we take on all liability, and of course you're not getting fees anymore, but the fees would come to the county for the permitting. We provide all the inspection genres: building, electrical, plumbing, mechanical. Our plan review is done in-house. The one thing that we don't do is zoning approval. And in your packet, I've given you a list of the townships that we currently do business with, for you to contact them to see how they work with us. Typically what happens is zoning approval is done at the local level, and then once those approvals are had, they bring those to us and apply for their permits. We don't issue permits to anything that hasn't been previously approved by the city or the township. And also, I had gotten some questions, and I don't know if those were passed on. I'm thinking that they were. So I answered some questions. That's also in your packet. And then I got a couple extra questions. So I tried to answer those. One of those was about how we would handle the historic district. I know that the county has a GIS layer that is in place that identifies all the historic parcels. Typically, that would be something that would be done prior to zoning approval. However, it can be done however we work it out. I mean, there's no reason why we can't check that throughout the plan review process. We can identify those parcels also. So it's just really working out the logistics of it. And then I got a question, actually it came Friday and I wasn't in Friday. so I didn't even see it until right before we came. It was a question about fees, so I would like to try to address that right now. It says, can you estimate for me how much it would cost for each of the following projects under the county's current fee schedule? And in your packet, I've also identified our fee schedules too. The actual building permit application is there, and within that application, it's what walks people through the process of how to get a building permit. And then the other 3 applications are electrical, plumbing, and mechanical, and the fees are on the back of that. So hopefully that's going to answer the majority of the questions that you have, but just to be real quick about a roof replacement, generally residential is around $145. Furnace and air conditioning is around $140. Windows, about $145, and kitchen bath remodel, if it's under $20,000 in construction costs, it's about $145. Building permits are based on construction cost, so anything under $20,000 is a minimum permit fee. Anything over that is based at, I think it's $110 plus $6 a thousand, but it's in the formula on the fee schedule that I gave you all. So I'm hoping that answers that question. We do have our own Board of Appeals, which is a requirement for a building department. Trying to think if I missed anything. I don't want to take up a lot of time because I know you're trying to get through a lot of people, so I provided a lot of information for you to look over. Hopefully, it'll answer a lot of questions, but I'll answer anything you want to ask me at this time.
Very good. We appreciate your attendance this evening and your cooperation and your willingness to submit a proposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to start to my left, and I guess at the next round I'll start to my right. Mr. Rhodes, do you want to begin with your questions, and then we'll move to Mr. Har, Mr. Seo, and so on?
I actually have no specific questions for this person. Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Har?
No questions at this point.
No? Mr. Seo?
No question, just a comment that I didn't get a copy of the fee schedule in this packet.
Oh, well, here, I'll give you another one. You can have the whole thing. It should be in there.
I have no questions.
Question? Okay. Ms. Dillon?
No questions at this time.
No questions from me either.
Mr. Gearbaugh?
Of course, I have a couple questions, thanks. Just, could you go over for me the hours of availability that you would have in terms of your inspectors and so forth? So it would be 8 to 5 every day, so if somebody would contacted the office or so forth?
The office is open from 8:30 to 5 every day. The inspectors are in the morning from 8 to 9 to answer questions, to give out times for inspections. They are available to meet by appointment, so they're generally very accessible. They do, you know, if you leave them a message, they'll call you by the next morning. Nope.
Our cell phones usually, we usually get calls, they'll go to the office and then they'll call us and tell us to call this person. And usually by that time, they usually get our cell phones. And so we do get calls throughout the day from a lot of contractors, as well as we do call them back.
Okay. And then you mentioned online application and so forth. So what's the turnaround on those, 24 hours, 48 hours?
Those are done within 24 hours. Yeah.
I'm glad to hear about the HDC because that has been a concern here in terms of complying for it.
After I got the question, I did some research, because of course we don't currently, you know, deal with that. Usually it's done at the level before they give zoning approval. But again, it can be done however we want to do it. We can flag those parcels.
That sounds good. And then one of the things I saw, this may be something that we did, but when we talk about window replacement, that's really a big issue in our historical district. And in this one, it says no inspections are required. Is that true from the county's perspective?
No,
Okay.
they are required through the county.
At this point, that's just my questions.
That's it, Mr. Gearbaugh? Okay. One more opportunity for my colleagues to ask any questions of the representatives from Washtenaw County. Mr. Rhodes, we want to make sure you wait till you get the microphone.
Was there one in there?
No,
Mr. Seo?
Oh, it's right here.
I'm all set.
No, we need to get Mr. Rhodes the microphone.
This is it right here.
And I may have misheard a bit, but I believe Councilmember Gearbaugh asked about the time to process permit requests. Was that right? And you said 24 hours? That's got to be
That's-
only for very simple
Yes, that's
requests.
online permits. Okay, so I should probably clarify that. Online permitting, you can't do online permitting if there's plan review required. So basically what we do online for building permits are roofing, siding, windows. But of course, we'd have to change that if we were looking for historic districts in the window end of it. And for trades that don't require plan review, which is electrical, plumbing, mechanical. If they're commercial and they require plan review, we don't do them online, because of course we have to do the plan review.
Right, and so is there a typical turnaround time for, well, new construction is pretty complicated, so I won't ask that, but say an addition on a remodeled
You're looking at
residential?
less than 7 days when, from the time they come in. They're moving pretty fast right now, and now in our busiest season, it could be a little bit longer, but right now, they're only running a few days.
And how many plan review people do you have?
They all are certified in plan review.
The inspectors do the plan review?
Yeah, each trade does the plan review, and mostly the building does the projects, but when it gets into the electrical, plumbing, mechanical, each trade goes through the plans. So depending on the commercial and what size house, each trade will look at that plan.
And the individual who does the plan review, are they also the inspector on that particular project, or they may or may not be?
Typically, but there's a couple inspectors, and it bounces back and forth sometimes, or maybe the same person each time, it depends.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. Ms. McClellan, please.
Just for the public's record, where is the office located? Like, where would they be going to do this?
So our office is located on Zeeb Road, right off of 94, 705 Zeeb.
Okay, thank you.
One more opportunity for questions. You going to make any additional comment?
No, we provide a really good service, and we take a lot of pride in how we treat our customers. So we'd be happy to work with your community.
Thank you both. Appreciate your time.
Doug? Come on up. Carla Wortman?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having us. I don't know if that's working or
Yeah,
not.
pull it a little closer, Doug. It's on, though. As long as the green light is on at the base, it's working.
Thanks for having us. This is Craig Strong from our office, and I'm going to do the kind of introductions about our service and kind of turn it over to Craig. We have a division, or let me back up. My name is Doug Lewan, and I'm the Vice President of Carlisle Wortman Associates. And we are primarily a community planning firm, and I know most of you from my work here with the city as your planning consultant for many years. We also have a division of Carlisle Wortman Associates called Code Enforcement Services. That's why we're here tonight, to talk about code enforcement services. CES provides building department services for a number of communities in this part of Michigan. Currently, we provide building administration services to 10 different communities, and we do plan review, which is the building plan review for about 17 different communities, including the city of Saline. And we do code enforcement for about 6 different communities, mostly around here in Washtenaw County. So this is, again, a division of Carlisle Wortman Associates. It's certainly related, but a little bit different. And because of that, we hired Craig Strong, who is a principal shareholder with Carlisle Wortman Associates as well. And Craig will run you through our proposal, and between Craig and myself, try to answer any questions that you might have. So, Craig?
Please.
I am the Director of Code Enforcement Services.
Great. Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
Just a little bit closer.
I am the Director of Code Enforcement Services. We manage, as Doug said, we had 10. We did manage the city of Ann Arbor as far as the building official for the last 2 years. That ended last week. They now have a new building official, which is a good thing. So our main emphasis is to come into a department, and a lot of the departments we do enter is exactly this way. Someone's retiring, communities are looking for different options. We take a look at each community. A lot of them are in the red at the time. We try and work out a system to where we can get them back in the black, and we've been successful in most of them in just a few years. Some of those examples would be Springfield Township, City of Howell, and we're working with other communities to work to that. And obviously, one of the ways that, one thing you look at are fee structures. I did, if you could just pass these around, I don't think I made enough copies, but maybe we can share every other one. Those aren't included in your packet because I was sitting around this morning thinking maybe I need to take a little closer look at the fee structures. This is actually a fee study that I included the City of Milan and Saline into with other communities that I had done in the past. But we can go back to that in a minute. What we're kind of looking at here, and we were approached by Todd to actually staff your department in this building to keep your department accessible to your citizens. And we took a look at having someone available basically 5 days a week, but not necessarily on site. Our proposal would be to supply a building official, and at this point it would be me, for at least 1 day out of that week physically on site in the office. We would have a building inspector available 5 days a week, 8 to 5. Administrative staff, that was something that was kind of an option. We understood at the time that you had a person available to do that, so we gave you a couple of proposals there. So the numbers, they do have all the numbers then, Todd? Okay, so they should have all that information.
They will, they don't have it now.
Right, okay. So our proposal basically is to keep your department running somewhat the way it is. And if required, we would bring on a full-time administrative staff. Now, we have proposed to not man the office 1 day a week, so it would be a 4-day-a-week operation. But all other services, inspection, and my phone number is available to everybody, my cell number, basically 5 days a week. So if we can go back to the fee study, if everybody's got it in front of them, I was just curious to see where your permit fees were compared to other communities. And it looks like Milan and Saline are similar. Well, let me explain this study first. There's 3 scenarios here. The first scenario is based on a 1,000 square foot addition to a house valued at $75,000. And you can, if you go across and look at, for instance, what Saline, that permit fee would cost, including plan review and the trades, somewhere around $1,215 for that project. City of Milan would be at $1,355. The biggest difference there is the plan review fee. And then you can go down and look at the average for, in this case, it's 7 communities. That average is at $1,068 for the 7 communities surveyed. The next one is for a 2,500 square foot house valued at $230,000. And again, Saline is pretty close to the average of the communities surveyed, Milan being a little higher, and again, because of the plan review fee. And the last one is a commercial project, 18,000 square foot, valued at $4.5 million. And both Saline and Milan are above the average of the survey. But from the other communities in the area, for example, City of Ann Arbor, they're not exorbitant. So that being said, I spoke with Todd about this in our earlier meeting. There is a system to where if you decide you want your department to be paid for by these fees. International Code Council has an established system approved by the state of Michigan. It actually uses your 3-year average construction valuation. In other words, the actual projects that are being built in your community. They use those numbers. You take your annual budget number, divide it into that, and you get a multiplier. That multiplier is, and it's based on construction value. So if you have a $230,000 house, you just times it by the multiplier, it gives you the permit fee. That's supposed to return the money back to the community to pay for the department. And there's a lot of communities that use it, City of Howell included. City of Ann Arbor has, it's not the same system, but it's based on the same criteria. So it's just something for the council to think about if you want your department to be self-sufficient, self-supporting. Any questions?
Doug, anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, just a couple that I missed was about, just a little bit about the staff. Currently, Code Enforcement Services has 6 plan reviewers that we utilize, and we have 3 administrative staff that actually work in a community as their, to accept incoming permits, and we do that in 3 different communities. So we have 3 different administrative folks and then plan reviewers, but 6 of those currently on staff. So I just wanted to point that out.
Anything else, gentlemen? Well, let's begin with questions. Can I start with you, Mr. Gearbaugh?
Sure. So Doug, in your situation, you would continue to do our plan reviews just like we do currently, and that kind of aspect would take over. In terms of the inspectors, then you're saying we would continue to subcontract for our inspectors for electrical, plumbing, and whatever? Okay. So if we ended up having say we didn't have someone available to do the electrical, then we're going to be stuck trying to find someone to do that?
No, we have those on staff.
Okay, so you would have that kind of situation?
We wouldn't want to make any changes with any of the contractors you have currently, but if something happens, somebody goes on vacation, gets sick, or changes, we can provide the inspectors.
Okay, that's kind of the concern I had, was making sure we have backup for that. That's my question for now.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Ms. McClellan?
I guess I should have asked this of the county, but the difference between having a zoning official on staff all the time versus not having anyone on staff, what I'm seeing here? I guess that's a question maybe for you or for Gary.
Well, there are different aspects of zoning official responsibilities. Some are standard code, nuisance ordinances, some are with the building code. Building inspector handles it. And some are in the site plan and zoning code, which, we get a number of calls every day for this, and usually a citizen wants an answer as to what direction they need to take, what section of the code to follow, whether the rules apply to them, they want to know, and whether or not we're interpreting the rules properly on the zoning code. So that's the extent of the use of the zoning code and how it's applied. So it is something that either I or the building official can do because we're both familiar with the zoning code. The other aspect is code enforcement, and that's going to the next step of sending out notices and trying to get either compliance voluntarily, which is maybe 90% of the time, but a lot of times it ends up resulting in a courtesy notice, and then sometimes it ends up in the issuance of a citation, and a staff member would actually have to issue that.
Also, can I add to that? As a building official, for example, I was with the City of Milan as their building and zoning official for 10 years back in the 90s. So I know Gary. Gary and I have worked together. I do zoning reviews in practically every community where they don't have an actual zoning official. So I'm very familiar with zoning ordinances. I would be able to answer any question that came in or through phone. Doug's always going to be available. as your planner. So we should be able to supply that service.
I guess that's my question. Maybe I should have asked the county of that. So if we went with Washtenaw County, there is no one available to do that? Is that correct?
No, we don't currently do zoning, but the townships that we currently deal with contract out to.
Okay. All right. I think that was my question. Thank you.
Ms. Dillon, any questions?
Not at this time.
Ms. Mitchell?
Can you talk a little bit about historical district?
Same thing, when I was with the city of Milan, we had a historic district. City of Howell Historic District, I work very closely with them. I understand the process. We don't, the first thing I did get on your website and take a look at your district. I was a little surprised that downtown is not included in it. According to the map, it's basically north and south on Saline Ann Arbor Road, but your downtown looks very historic. But so it kind of works like zoning review. When we get a permit application and we first check the different maps, first the zoning map for districts, and then if it's in a historic district, basically everything gets put on hold and it goes to your commission. We won't even look at it for even zoning until it comes through the commission and we see some form of an approval letter. We would also file that up in the field to make sure that when we do the inspection, that it does comply with what the district required. So, does that answer your question? Okay.
Mr. Seal?
And again, I forgot to ask the county this question too, but what do you do when somebody from a particular neighborhood comes in where they have say a condominium association set of their own bylaws and their own restrictions on building and the things they do in that, they're allowed to do in that neighborhood through the bylaws?
We work very closely in a lot of our communities with different subdivisions. Even though we don't enforce their bylaws, typically we'll work out an agreement with the presidents of those associations. We look for some kind of approval letter from them. Sometimes they might get missed, but I've had that happen. But we try and treat it just like any other zoning issue or a historic district issue, even though we're not required to by law.
Thank you, Mr. Seal. Mr. Hart?
Thank you. Could you talk a little bit about how you're working with contractors and homeowners who are going through the application process? Do you have an online application? People come in directly, and what's your turnaround time?
On our website, you can see, if you go to cescode.com, we have all of our communities listed there, and we have applications that are actually fillable applications. What we'd like to do on the bigger projects is to bring all parties in for what we call a pre-construction or even a pre-design meeting, so everybody gets on the same page. That's a service that we offer for free. It's easier for us to get up front any problems that may occur. But all the forms will be on our website. And typically what we do with our communities is we'll actually have your website. If they go to application on your site, it links ours, so it goes right to our site. They'll be able to pull up the applications, fill them out, and submit them. They get submitted to an email address, and they come right to us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Mr. Rhodes?
How many building inspectors would you have available?
I would assign one inspector for the city, and actually that individual he's lived in Saline area for all of his life. He just moved out of town, but he lives, I think he's over in York Township.
Okay, well, having one regular building inspector is helpful.
Well, we have more building inspectors. What we do is if we've got somebody going on vacation, we'll have somebody fill in for them. So you'll constantly have the service. You won't have to make that call that, I'm sorry, he's on vacation this week, you can't get an inspection. So there will be somebody available.
Okay, and then Can you speak a bit to the difficulties that the building department has experienced in the city of Ann Arbor over the last few years?
I think I could. How much
believe
time do you have?
Well, hit some of the high points, because have served on the board of what is now the Builders and Remodelers Association. And as you know, we had a task force and we
Go to that
met.
meeting every month.
Right. And there's been a whole lot of dissatisfaction with the difficulties of dealing with Ann Arbor.
Right.
And so I'd just like to hear from your side of it, why that is and what could
Well,
have been done.
I can tell you, most of that has been taken care of. And when I first I was asked for the assignment of being their building official, I took note of a lot of things that I felt needed to be changed. And fortunately, I got the city council to go along with it. And things have gotten, if you would just speak with some of the members on that board now, and they'll tell you, when I first started going to those meetings, they would basically feed you and then beat you. But we've gotten it now to where all the inspectors are accountable. They all have their cell phones. Contact is no longer a problem. It took us 2 years, but we found an individual who I believe is going to be a perfect fit as a building official. And we also convinced the council that they needed a deputy building official, which they're looking for right now. I currently have one of my staff serving as deputy building official there, and he'll stay there until they have one. There's been some reorganization. They moved a couple of supervisors around to give more supervision to the inspectors. There's been a couple of inspectors since I've been there that been kind of asked to go elsewhere, and that's happened. And I can tell you right now, it's 100% better than what it was.
Okay, thank you.
Just Craig can follow up on this. Just maybe, Craig, you can describe our time there. And we were brought in, which some of you may or may not know, on an interim basis. Not that, 2 years ago, a year ago? And 2 years ago. And so we came in with the full understanding that we were not going to be the permanent building official, but we were brought in to kind of shore things up and help the department. So maybe just a brief description of kind of that whole process.
Well, the first day I went in there was December 12th, 2014. It was like you described. It was a mess. The inspectors weren't being supervised. That was one of the first things that I noticed, and we took care of that in our contract, we did not want responsibility of supervision. We felt that it was going to be a conflict because of the union, because we are a private company. So right away, we decided to put another supervisor, and actually, they were the supervisor of the rental housing inspection division. So she ended up taking over also the building inspector division, and that's going to stay in place. That was probably the biggest issue. And we tried to stress customer service to the inspectors, and that's what we do. And probably the most important thing, because if you can let somebody know that you care about their problem, whatever it is, right or wrong, and show them the right direction, things usually go smooth.
Yeah, it is true, things have improved there recently, so and I'm glad of that. There are some contractors who won't even do work in the city of Ann Arbor anymore because of the hassle that they have to
I
go
was
through.
one of them at one point,
Yeah, and I'm still one.
years ago. Things have changed.
Well, gentlemen, let me make a few comments, and then if you want to respond, you're welcome to do that. First of all, and I'm certainly not unbiased, but at the same time, I'm not going to commit to anything this evening. This is a very interesting proposal, and I appreciate you submitting it. There are certain aspects of the proposal that I really like, including the fact that there would be normal office hours. I think that's critically important to some of our smaller builders and developers, but also to individual homeowners who might not know how to navigate the system and rely on a human rely on having a human contact in the department to address some of their questions and concerns. I also want to talk a little bit about code enforcement, and maybe get you to respond. And Mr. Luan, I think you and I have maybe touched on this in the past, but code enforcement is something I've really emphasized in recent years. It's not accidental that some communities in Southeast Michigan, I'm thinking of some in Oakland County specifically, that we think of as being very welcoming, being really aesthetically pleasing, put a really strong and high emphasis on code enforcement. And I think historically we have done that here when we have had a code enforcement officer. We don't want to be overly aggressive, but we want to be tough and we want to be fair. Now there's a number of communities that contract with Carlisle-Wortman for code enforcement services, and we can do our own internal research on that service that you provide. But do you want to talk maybe a little bit about what kind of feedback you get from some of your current clients?
Yeah, our current, I think we represent about 6 or so. I think I listed them here. Currently, mostly within the Washtenaw County area, some up in Oakland County. And just very much like our building department services, we can tailor this to however the community wants. In some cases, on the one end of the spectrum, we will operate code enforcement on a complaint basis. So if some communities don't want, the code enforcement official to be driving around the community looking for things, they just want to work on a complaint basis, and that's a specific request from city council or township board or whoever we're working for. In some communities, we will have someone more actively involved, actually having office hours at the community, so that if there are questions, a resident can come on a certain day and know that they can talk to the code enforcement official. So that's the kind of range that we have. And generally the feedback we've gotten has been good. In my my theory on code enforcement is that if you have to take someone to court, you've failed. We think code enforcement should be something you do. You work with the residents. You try to let people correct things that are wrong. But it's certainly not my philosophy, and I still work as zoning administrator in one community, and I certainly work very closely in zoning in all other communities I work in. It's our thought that it's not our goal to issue tickets and take people to court. It's our goal to work with people, try to get compliance through our own enforcement, through in this case, the city's own enforcement. I had a very wise attorney once tell me that if code enforcement does go to, 2 things happen when code enforcement goes to the city attorney. The costs go up and local control goes down. And so we try to avoid costs going up and local control going down, and we try to do things as much as we can in-house. That's kind of my philosophy and how we approach code enforcement.
Mr. Luan, I can assume the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. When you were initially in touch with city staff, specifically our city manager, to provide a proposal, I think he indicated that our last code enforcement officer was not a full-time position, but hovering around 30 hours, which I think is mirrored in your proposal. However, I have been an advocate historically, and I will continue to be an advocate, that as our financial situation improves, that we look to reinstate, we look to have a 40-hour-a-week code enforcement officer. And I would assume that as we move into the ensuing years, if by chance we decided to partner with you, you would be able to do that if that was the prerogative of City Council.
Sure. We have folks that we can work with, that Craig currently works with and is in contact with. And because so many communities are different in how they want to approach this, one of the communities that I'm very familiar with, they actually continue to hire their own code enforcement folks. I'm not suggesting you do that, but we can work in that kind of realm where we're actually supervising those people in their city employees, or we can provide personnel and increase those hours to the amount that's needed by the city.
Very good. Are there additional questions for our guest from Carlisle Wortman? Mr. Rhodes, and I believe Mr. Hart, did you have an additional question, or was it addressed? No, well, actually, we'll just go right back around the circle.
Okay, one short, easy one. Building official services available to meet with citizens of permit applications. Where would that person be? Would they be here?
Yes, that would be me.
Yeah, and so you'd be resident here 1 day a week?
Yes.
Okay,
But that's flexible too. If they needed it soon, then I can rearrange my schedule to be here.
okay, thank you.
Okay, that was one of my questions. The other was to go back to the turnaround time on applications.
Typically, residential applications, as soon as they get through HDC and zoning, the next day. If they're commercial projects, we've got, like Doug said, 6 plan reviewers on staff. One of them is mechanical, electrical, plumbing, that's all he does. So our turnaround time is very quick. On a major commercial project, you're probably looking at 5 to 7 days. As long as they're good plans. Sometimes you get plans that architects don't agree with you on, it goes back and forth. But
Anything else, Mr. Hart? Mr. Seo, any additional questions?
You mentioned you work with neighborhood association presidents to kind of go through bylaws and so on. How do you determine who those folks are?
they usually contact us.
Okay.
Because they don't want, and we understand this, they don't want projects going around them. I mean, there's a process, and they agreed to it when they signed the bylaws, so we understand it.
Ms. Mitchell, anything?
Mr. Har covered my follow-up question.
Okay. Ms. Dillon?
I just want to touch back on the code enforcement officer. Would you be staffing a single person for all of the hours, or is it just a pool where we'd get somebody different?
We always try and make one person, or how many ever you need, so the community gets to know them.
Right.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Now, we might bring somebody in to cover for that person if he's off, but.
Right.
I'm assuming this, but I want to just clarify, the liability for plan reviews and stuff, that all falls on you guys?
We have insurance to cover that.
Okay.
That was one of the questions, but could you kind of clarify for me, one of the things that I know we're concerned about is always tracking everything. So how are you going to maintain the permits and everything in compliance so that the information's there to do any kind of reporting and all that? Going from a paper product to either online database or however, and I'm just not understanding how that would improve upon.
Typically, in the communities we work in, we use their software programs, which you use BSNA. We use BSNA everywhere except the city of Ann Arbor, who I think I've got them convinced to go back to. But in BSNA, you can track every component of the permitting in that system, also code enforcement actions against certain properties. It's a very good program. We also maintain paper files, which I've been trying to get all of our communities now to scan these documents, and those actually go into BSNA systems. I know that the state requires you to keep these and maintain these records for certain lengths of time, but there comes a point where you just can't store all these physical documents. So we try to utilize BSNA for most of it.
So you would basically come in and assess that and determine how we could improve upon that,
Best,
whatever else we
yeah.
could do?
Record
Continue.
storage and management, right.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? Gentlemen, do you have anything else you'd like to add this evening?
Well, just that I'm somewhat of a hometown guy. I raised my family in Milan, very familiar with Saline. Loved the football games. And, certainly like an opportunity to work with you folks.
Excellent. Doug?
The only final thing is that in all the communities that we work in and provide this service, and this service probably a little more so than other services we provide, is every community is a little bit different. And as we go into this process, if, you know, if our proposal does make sense to you and you want to find out more about it or go further, and there's something maybe that's not quite the way you like it, I mean, we have tailored these kinds of services and these kinds of proposals. I mean, if you look at all the different communities we work in, each is just slightly different based on the needs and desires of the community. So we'd certainly be willing to work with you guys. If there's something you need tweaked, we can do that.
Very good. Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Tom Toth from York Township.
Good evening. I'm Tom Toth from York Township. I'm the building and zoning official for York Township. I have been for, about 19 and a half years. I've actually been the deputy inspector here for 18. I was here before Tillman was hired. I was between Bill Wroblewski and Tillman. So I'm pretty familiar with the community. I'm kind of a believer in local control. I think that people feel more comfortable being able to come into their community and talk to somebody. If they've got a question, they've got to be able to ask them a question. In my proposal, I'm 6 miles down the road is where my office is. I'm there every day from 9 to 12, and then I'm in the field from 12 to 2:30. I would strongly suggest the city of Saline keep their own office personnel. I don't think it's that much. I think you need a secretary for maybe 3 hours a day. That's what I would propose. I don't see any reason to change using your plumbing, mechanical, and electrical people now unless there's a problem with the city. I happen to know all of the people. They're all good people. Everybody here you're talking today is the same. We've all worked together for years. And I don't think you can go wrong with anybody. I just believe more in local control than most. My proposal would be to have the city of Saline keep their personnel in the building department. I would be the building official and the building inspector. I would also be responsible for zoning. Code enforcement would be on a complaint-only basis. With my discussions with Tillman Taylor, he is under the opinion that it may take more hours than what the city is aware of to do code enforcement. It may be something that you may have to consider in the future, going with somebody full-time. Sometimes it's a little more involved than what people think. I would also have to be, the city would also have to give me the permission to go to court. That would be part of my responsibilities. We could supply just the same as everybody else's. I don't see any reason to change. My proposal also would be to be in the office here in the city of Saline from 2:30 to 4:30 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That's flexible except for Mondays. I also, if the people want to come to York Township, we're there 9 to 12 every day. People come in and talk to us. We're very open about that. The township is very supportive of that. It gives the people just a little more leeway on if they have to come in to see us. Turnaround time on permits on a house would be 7 to 10 days. On small permits probably would be a couple of days. That would also, zoning has to be involved in that also. Okay, we've all talked about the same things here, so I don't want to be a dead horse. So, got any questions?
Excellent. All right. Mr. Gearbuck, can I start with you?
Sure. So you're talking about who would be backup for you if you were out of vacation or something like that?
Kim Spittler, right now, next week he's going to be the building official for the city of Chelsea, and he has agreed to do it. He would have to do those in the afternoon. My inspections usually are going to be after 12:30. I have office hours at York Township until 12 o'clock.
Okay.
And there is one on my proposal, there is a mistake. It should have been 35 in inspection instead of 45 in inspection. Also, the city of Saline would keep all the permit fees. You have my schedule there in front of you.
I don't think any questions for me at this time.
No questions at this time.
Ms. Mitchell? Nothing?
I have nothing, thank you.
Mr. Hart, nothing? No. Mr. Rhodes?
Yeah, Tom, one of the reasons we're here is because Tillman is retiring. How far away are you from retiring, sir?
Oh, my retirement is not good enough to retire. I should have taken a job in Saline 18 years ago. Probably 6, 7 years.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Any additional questions from the group? Tom, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have Mr. Campbell address the proposal from Pittsfield Township, and I believe he will try his very best to address any questions and concerns that you may have.
So I believe everyone had it in their packet. They currently provide similar services for the city of Ypsi, building department, as well as Northfield, thank you, Northfield Township. So as you can see, the terms, again, it was for the most part, pretty straightforward. Building inspections, trade inspections, that type of thing. So no code enforcement. And we did, just so you know, as I mentioned, we did invite them, but they declined to come tonight. I think. So the office hours, I think here, again, we didn't talk specific with them. I mean, they gave us an example of their agreement with Ypsi is something that would be, for the most part, mirror what we would do here if we were to utilize them. So for office hours, and they have a separate billing fee for those. I think here. So what they would, Pittsfield, supervision of the building inspectors, provided by Pittsfield and independent contractors for the trades. They would provide and coordinate emergency damage assessment service with Washington County, oversee the keeping of building department records, make recommendations to the city regarding policy and fees. They would make all the building inspections under the code for all the permits that have been pulled, make inspections requested by the city for complaints in connection with construction, determine whether or not an outside consultant would be required. So again, because you all, I know you have it here in front of you, so talk about what the city would provide. Again, this is similar. Personnel to receive, file, and maintain all permits and inspection records, personnel who would process all fees and for permits and inspections, legal services for initiating all enforcement actions, office space for inspectors to hold site office hours, similar to these other folks that have already talked with us this evening, as far as if they did want to come in and meet somebody in our office here at City Hall. Copies of permit application, inspection requests. Going through every word for word, but I'm sure you all have reviewed this already. But so that's kind of that's what they would offer to provide.
Again, Mr. Campbell will try his best to address any questions or concerns regarding the Pittsfield proposal. If anyone has questions or concerns. Mr. Rhodes, please.
It's kind of a general question. Since they don't do plan review, if we were to go with them, would we continue to do plan review with Carlisle Wortman as we do now?
Right.
Or somebody, yeah.
Because the Pittsfield uses and also plan reviews, many others do, York Township.
And I don't know the answer to when their hours are open at Pittsfield, but they're always open whenever I go in there. So.
Additional questions? Mr. Gearbuck, please.
How large is their staffing in terms of number of building supervisors or whatever? Is it just one individual or is it multiple?
They have multiple. Gary, do you recall, Craig?
Don Shores retired, but I believe another one, I believe, is backup supervisor, especially as more. Both Kurt Newman and Tom Gilbert on backup
So where they're mentioning this, working with us, has basically been on the backup needs that we've needed when someone hasn't been available.
Right, well, as Tom mentioned a minute ago, I mean, they all travel in the same circles, right? I mean, they all, they tend, a lot of them tend to back each other up, so.
So we basically subcontract through all of those, or?
Yeah, I mean, we have our, what I would call our frontline, our main trade inspectors, but we also have backups, right? In case they're out, vacation, sick, whatever. And we even have, for Tillman, as Gary just said, so, in the past, when he's been on vacation and whatnot, so.
Got it. That's it.
Okay. Ms. Mitchell, you gotta make sure you get the microphone.
Could I have Mr. Rubel just confirm the number of staff? Because I heard names, but I wasn't quite sure where we are with people who do which jobs and administrative support and all that.
Well, I don't know, we have a number,
We don't have that information.
maybe Gary, I
You
don't,
mean the city staff?
for Pittsfield.
Oh, Pittsfield, no, I don't have that with me. But we use their plumbing inspector and the others as backup as needed.
Additional questions from the group regarding the Pittsfield proposal? Mr. Campbell, do you care to make any additional comments at this time?
No, I mean, this is operations for sure, but certainly if we were to change, I mean, it's a significant change, it becomes a policy change, and as all you know, right, that's where some of your questions were about, were office hours and turnaround time and essentially the quality of service and what we're used to, the level that we're used to having someone on site or someone on our staff that's full-time here. And again, that is certainly still an option, but to Mayor Marl's points at the beginning, that this is the opportunity to take and review and look and see if there's a better way to serve our residents, so hopefully more efficient as well as we go forward. Certainly, the code enforcement is something we've struggled with the last few years because of budget constraints, and then we'd hired someone and that was going pretty well, and then that person took a full-time job, and you will on the sheet here that comparisons that Elle did, which I think she did a nice job on that, but you'll see in under the city, again, it's based on 25 hours, and that's what we've had. This past year, it started in January. It was difficult to find somebody, but we did, but we would propose. I think right now we're at 13 or a little over 13 an hour, and that was what I would propose at this point would be to dramatically increase that. And what we propose, what you see in here is I think $25 an hour, but still, again, the resources aren't the greatest, but we're still trying to, that's what we need to provide to try and fill that spot. And so, there could be a combination of things here too, right? And I think Doug Luan mentioned that about, some communities, while they may enter into an agreement with Carla Wortman code services for certain levels of different tasks, but then the city maintain another. So, for instance, potentially we maintain and hire a part-time code enforcement officer, and maybe we do something different with one of these other alternatives. But certainly, I do agree that it's very difficult to be proactive, as I know that's council's prerogative. It's certainly staff's prerogative too, to be proactive and not simply be reactive to complaints, but be out there driving around and trying to see things before they reach a complaint level to our offices. So, but like I said, it is a challenge, but it's doable, but these are some other ways we can potentially provide the top-level services to our residents.
Well, let me just add this, and then I would welcome any questions, comments, concerns from my colleagues on council. Again, based on what I said at the beginning of tonight's meeting and what Mr. Campbell just said, based on the fact that our code enforcement officer recently left to take a full-time job, based on the pending retirement of our longtime building official, it seemed an appropriate time to review this department. Needless to say, building inspecting, engineering services, code enforcement are pretty fundamental things. They are very important. We've been very blessed to have a department throughout the years that is comprised of a lot of competent and dedicated individuals. But at the same time, we owe it to our citizens to evaluate this and to maybe identify some opportunities for cost savings and improved efficiencies. Again, we appreciate all of our guests this evening from Washtenaw County, from Carlisle-Wortman, and from York Township. I also appreciate the proposal that was submitted by Pittsfield Charter Township. Again, what I'm going to be looking for is consensus on how best to move forward at our second meeting in January. That's on the 9th, whether that's to maintain the status quo or to begin negotiations with one of these 4 entities to provide some additional or supplemental services. In the interim, if you do have questions or concerns that you think of after tonight's meeting, please direct those to the city manager. We want to make sure you have all the appropriate and ample information to make an informed and solid decision. So with that, I'll conclude my remarks. Are there any other questions from my council colleagues at this time? Mr. Har, please. Make sure you get the microphone, though.
It's just a town question. Are we going to discuss this on the 9th or on the 23rd? The discussion on the 9th, so that's the first meeting, not the second meeting.
Oh, excuse me, then the second meeting, I'm sorry. The 23rd.
Okay, thank you.
Not the meeting where we're going to be, where 3 of us and myself will be sworn in. Correct, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
My mistake, thank you for clarifying that. Okay. Additional questions or comments from City Council? Mr. Gearbaugh?
Just comments. I appreciate this because I think this is something that we have to do in terms of looking and assessing everything. And one of my concerns has always been succession planning and so forth. And one of the things that I know, having an organization that has multiple individuals in place, namely the county or the Carlisle-Wortman, would have the ability to not only be up to date on things, but also are looking at what's happening currently and trends and so forth that are going through. My one aspect of the county being that the county is ultimately responsible. It's a liability issue that we potentially could move over to them. I think we're still going to be sharing liability with whatever other organization we go with. The problem and concerns that we have either way is how to handle the ordinance enforcement. But the other piece that I look at is there's multiple aspects of the building department which, we're looking at administrative, policy enforcement, plan review and planning, inspections, and then miscellaneous other aspects that are in terms of things that you wouldn't consider normally part of the building department, but they are functional activities of the city. So it's really understanding, from my own part at the next meeting, what pieces do we still hold on to, what do we let go of, and currently we do have some staffing here. How could we better utilize them, or I guess redefine positions if we had to at that aspect. So from my perspective, those are the pieces that I'm looking at and trying to understand, which I know that you've all addressed, but for me, it's really having that ability that we can transition to something that can take over immediately and handle it effectively and be able to be something that we can address and review on a regular basis if there is concerns or so forth.
Any additional comments? Mr. Seal, please.
This may or may not be related, and it is something of it's a reason why I think we spend the money to have some of these services in-house. I know my background in policing, the one thing that we tried to accomplish with the aspect or the concept of community policing was that the community got to know the police and the police got to know the community. And to some degree, I think the same thing happens when the building department operates in that kind of a manner. The person who is here, the building inspector, feels like they're part of the community, that they know the community, and that they want to make sure that the right thing is done. I have a brother who's in the building services. He's dealt with other building departments. And sometimes I think the anonymity that comes with walking in cold off the street with a set of documents to a building inspector or a building department you've never seen before breeds a certain amount of distrust, perhaps in some cases hostility on the part of the person who's receiving the message, just because they don't understand and they view this as bureaucracy at its finest. So part of me argues for keeping it in-house just because of the human touch that goes on when you have an employee here who's beholden to the community. Not that any of these other services don't attempt to provide excellent service. I just don't know. And I do know that to me, that's one of the real benefits of keeping these sort of things in-house. I guess the thing we have to question is the cost versus what the cost would be to farm that out. But I think you lose something when you lose a portion of what goes on within the community.
Mr. Rhodes?
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate the effort that everybody's gone to here to review this whole process. And it's a good spreadsheet. I totally support Councilmember CO's position about having somebody in-house. There is a definite value to that. This publication here is the current code book for Michigan residential building. You can pass it around and weigh it if you'd like. But some of it is very specific, but a lot of it is subject to interpretation by the building inspector. And if you get different inspectors at different times, it can really raise havoc with schedules. And scheduling on a construction project, particularly a smaller remodel addition or even a new house, is really critical. There are a lot of inspections that are required, a lot of steps that need to be taken. And if one of them gets delayed, it throws off the schedule for everybody else, because almost everybody that does construction work doesn't do it with their own employees. They all have subcontractors that they go to, and all of those subcontractors are also working for other general contractors. And so everybody's kind of juggling things all the time. So, you know, the process starts out with meetings between potential clients, potential contractors. They go back and forth, do some design work, get some agreement, get some deposit or whatever, and then a permit gets applied for. And that permit has typically plan review, which takes some period of time, costs some money. And then oftentimes there's also a soil erosion permit that has to be applied for if you're disturbing the earth. That's another document that takes time to get. And while the contractor is waiting for those approvals to come through, they're trying to schedule their trades, their subcontractors, so that they'll be available when they believe they need them. And so after you got your permits, then you got to work with the client to make sure they're okay when you get started, the weather, if it's an addition or whatever. And so then there's footing inspections, make sure that you've got the right kind of footing down there. And then there's, and I'm probably going to miss some of them, but there's rough framing inspections, there's rough electrical inspection, there's rough mechanical, rough plumbing, and then there's insulation inspections, there's drywall inspections, there's finish inspections of all of those other trades, there's a final building. Oftentimes there's a certificate of occupancy inspection that takes place. There is a boatload of inspections. And if one of those can't happen at the right time, and you can't call for them until you know that you're ready for them. And so you need an inspector who can come out when you need them. Because if you have to wait, as was the case up in Ann Arbor for a number of years, sometimes you had to wait 10 or 12 days for an inspector to show up and sign off on that piece of work before you could go to the next step, then you lost your place with all those subcontractors. And then everybody's scrambling. And the end result of that is you don't get as good of a job as what you should have. And that hurts the clients. And also with respect to the costs of those fees and inspections and re-inspections, those costs don't get paid for by the contractor. The contractor pays them, but those costs are built into the cost of the job, and it's the homeowners who end up paying for that. So we need to do what we can within the community, I think, to keep the cost of housing down to a reasonable amount. Obviously, the contractor is going to make a profit off of it, and as is all of the trades and all of the people providing the materials. So to have an in-house inspector, somebody that you know, and you know where they are, and you can talk to them, and they know the community, and they've been around, and homeowners know them, is there's a value to that. It's not something you can attach a specific dollar amount to, but it has a value. And, you know, one of the purposes of building inspectors is to make sure that the structure that's being constructed is safe to occupy and it's going to stand up. So it's also a safety issue. And the building department is one that is a little bit unusual because we have an opportunity to recover some of those costs. Whereas with the police department, you know, they also provide safety, and we don't recover any of those costs. That's a core service that the community provides. And I think building inspection ought to be a core service that this community provides. We need to charge fees to recover as much of the cost as we reasonably can, but you don't want to charge so much that people don't do the work, or they do it without going through the permits. And then you have additional issues. So anyway, that's kind of my point. I'm not going to be here when the vote comes up, but I certainly would advocate for, if at all possible, keeping an in-house building official.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. Any additional comments at this time, Ms. McClellan?
Again, I'm just curious, at the county level, I mean, it sounds like it's well organized. It's, you know, a handful of normal inspectors that you'd be working with in the area. But what the cost is for that code enforcement officer and, you know, the stuff that's not in some of these other plans. You said that you contract that out to Carla Wortman, but I'm wondering if there's kind of like a combination thing that we have at our own in-house enforcement officer and then use the county for the building inspection, and how that scenario may play out, if that's cost effective or if that ends up being the same amount of cost as some of these other plans by the time you add in the missing services to what the county offers.
Sure. Well, let me see. Back up and let me see if I can make sure. Let me know if I don't cover anything. So just a couple things. One, and I started down this road and I think I deviated and didn't come back on a bunny trail. But with our current with Tillman, you know, he wears a lot of hats, and so between building official and code enforcement, he also is the building maintenance for this facility. And so those, and of course with the building official doing the building inspections and coordinating all the other trades, making sure those get scheduled and that type of thing. Certainly would advocate for, like we did, where we had a part-time code enforcement officer to help be more proactive, right? And there's probably a good chance, and I know Jeff's here, hiding back there, I think, there he is. So, but I mean, you know, a lot of, as far as the property maintenance goes here, there are a number of things that essentially Tillman facilitates that, but DPW comes and makes the repairs. And so most likely that, whatever direction we go, that there's a good chance that would just go to DPW. So if something breaks, we call them and directly. So, but in any case, absolutely, and I think I mentioned that a few minutes ago, that there is a possibility to do a hybrid potentially if council did in fact want to go outside to a different alternative than we do currently. That potentially we would provide a code enforcement officer, and then, you know, if we were to contract with one of these other entities, that certainly could work. But also, I certainly don't disagree with Mr. CEO or Mr. Rhodes that the more in-house, the more control you maintain. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any additional comments? No? Okay, well, again, between now and our second meeting in January, if you do have questions, thoughts regarding this issue. If you require a certain piece or pieces of information to make an informed decision, please let the city manager know. Again, it will be a discussion item at our second meeting in January, and I'll be looking for consensus as to whether we keep the service in-house, maintain the status quo, engage with one of these 4 entities to provide service, or consider some sort of hybrid approach. But again, we'll be looking for consensus at our second meeting in January. Thank you all for your cooperation this evening. I think it was a good discussion. Obviously, it's an important issue, a big issue, and it requires a significant amount of thought. I also, again, want to thank Washtenaw County, Carlisle Wortman, York Charter Township for being here. And we also thank Pittsfield Charter Township for submitting a proposal. Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes, do you have a comment?
Yeah, sorry, question. How are we going to provide building services in the interim?
Gary, you want to kind of run through our temporary plan?
Well, right now, we use Tom Toth for our backup services, and he's willing to continue in that occupation, so we are working on a tentative agreement. He with his board, and then in turn with our city council, to perform whatever services are needed until we make a permanent decision.
Anything else? Okay. Appreciate everyone's participation this evening. I think it was a good discussion. We come to the second public comment period. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. If you have any comments, please make your way to the podium to my left.
Hello, Mary Hess. And I have always been concerned that our permits have never have not for the last 8 years covered our costs. And I do believe that our building permits and all of our other permits should cover that. I'm wondering as far as how long this would be a contract for. It's like I appreciate the council going through this and interviewing, and it is a big change. But what I'm wondering is if you can do a year contract, or are you committed to a multi-year contract? As anything goes, you try something, if it doesn't work, then you look again. But I know that I have called the building inspector and a couple other departments, and they have still yet to return a phone call. Thank you.
Additional citizen comments? Then the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn this work meeting at 7:23 p.m. Moved by Councilmember Gearbaugh. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilwoman Dillon. All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.